Okay, thank you to all of you who have come from great distances to get to young Israel tonight, right after Shabbat, Kol Hakavod, Pesach Sheni, Sameach, L'Kulam. Okay. Anyway, I'd like to call upon our distinguished speaker tonight. I must say, a man who doesn't need a very long introduction, but he is a U.S. World War II veteran, and I must say he is one of my favorite war heroes. Heroes as it is. Anyway, yeah. Anyways, I'd like to call upon my father, Sgt Lawrence Yellin, from Aurora, Illinois, and from Jerusalem, Israel, and he will tell us some of his experiences.
The question is whether he wants to use it.
I'd like to memorialize the words that I say tonight to the millions for whom the liberation came too late, and for those soldiers and my buddies who were not able but fought for the liberation, but were not able to finish it. 70 years ago, Europe was liberated from the Nazi killing machine that extended from England to Italy, from Russia to North Africa. The terrible destruction of human life and property suddenly screeched to a halt with May 8th, 1945. As an infantry soldier in the American 86th Infantry Division, I found myself on that day in Prague, Czechoslovakia, a lead scout for an unauthorized special forces organized under General George Patton. How I got there and the Jews that were liberated on the way is an unusual story. I grew up in Aurora, Illinois, a city of 50,000 people, close to Chicago. There were about 80 Jewish families, one synagogue, and the Yellin family was considered by, I guess, the others as the Haredim of the city because we observed 2 days of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Also, we kept the business closed on Shabbat, which was very difficult. Aurora had a large German population. It had a German school. It had a Bund who were, I would say, advocates of Hitler. They praised Hitler openly, and it made a big impression on my early years. The 1920s were also the years of Father Charles Coughlin, a Catholic priest, who spoke on Sunday nights, I think it was 7 o'clock, where he spewed anti-Semitic hatred in his sermons and his commentary. There was Gerald L.K. Smith, who organized the American First Party. American First Party was headed by Charles Lindbergh. I don't know, those of you who lived in that era probably remember 1936 when Charles Lindbergh went to Berlin and he met Hitler at Nuremberg, and they had a speech in which he embraced Adolf Hitler. There was Burton K. Wheeler, who claimed that bankers and Jews were responsible for pushing America into an unnecessary European war. was also a time when anti-Semitism was a little more open, and I can remember a bumper sticker that made a great impression on me. Colin Kelly. Colin Kelly was a hero, American hero who sank the first Japanese warship. And the bumper sticker said, Colin Kelly sunk the first Japanese warship, and Sam Cohen got the first ration ticket for tires for his Cadillac. And that was a prominent sticker that was in that time. It was a time when Jews considered themselves newcomers to the United States. And Jews were unsure of their status as Americans. When the USA declared war on Nazi Germany in 1941, I felt the Jews should be involved in the fight. I was, in 1943, at 17, as a high school graduate, I convinced my parents that it was my religious duty to fight the evil Nazis who were in the midst of exterminating our Jewish brothers and sisters in Europe. I wanted permission from my parents to volunteer for military service. It helped, no doubt, that they were assigning me to the ASTP, Army Specialized Training Program for officer engineers. This didn't sound so dangerous, not exactly a combat role, but I considered it a start. The ASTP program included basic military training. In November of 1943, our group was sent to Fort Benning, Georgia for the weapons part of the course. For me, trying to keep kosher was the primary challenge, not the weapons. I learned two things there. Number one, make friends with the mess sergeant. And number two, as often as possible, volunteer for KP. KP was Kitchen Police, politely called, but it was generally was a punishment for a job not well done. You had to get up at 4:30 in the morning, you had to scrub pots, peel potatoes, but you had to run of the kitchen food, and for me, that was a big advantage to get something that was kosher. The positive side of my dietary requirements was that I found that soon soldiers noticed that I passed on the main meat portion of the menu. I soon had friends that rushed to follow me in the chow line so they could take my rejected portion. The second challenge was to find time for morning prayers. This was swiftly brought home during basic training, and I thought I found a solution. When everybody else went for breakfast, I went in the barracks and put on chilling in the corner and davened. One morning, second lieutenant comes into the barracks and he spots me davening, and he was amazed, and he shouts, "Soldier, take off those straps." The inspector general was checking this barracks. Well, I was thinking about whether to comply with his order. The general and his staff walked in, and the lieutenant shouted, "Attention." I froze in my middle of Shemona Esrei. I was unsure how this was going to end. Perhaps I would get court-martialed for not having breakfast on time. I didn't think they would shoot me at dawn, but the general looked a little surprised when he saw me garbed in tefillin. And So he said, "At ease, soldier." At ease means go back to what you were doing. I finished chuckling, and the general said to the lieutenant, "Does this soldier pray every morning?" The sergeant said, "Well, sir, it's not authorized." He said, "Well, does he get breakfast after he prays?" "Oh, no, it's not in the book," said the lieutenant. The general thought a minute and he said, "Give this soldier 15 minutes to pray every morning, and afterwards see that he gets breakfast." Well, I thought that was a success. I went back to the mess hall. In about 15 minutes, everybody knew what happened. Two fellows walked over to me. One was a friend of mine who was a practicing Catholic. He said, "Larry, would you mind if I join you in prayer?" It turned out I had one Protestant in one corner and a Catholic in another corner, and I put on Dylan in the back of the barracks, and we had an ecumenical prayer service.
Were you the only Jew there? Were you the only Jew?
What?
Were you the only Jew?
I was the only Jew. At the end of 1943, the Army decided that they needed destroyers, not builders. They required soldiers, not engineers, so that the ASTP program was closed, and our group was transferred to the 86th Infantry Division in Alexandria, Louisiana. Combat infantry was closer to my goal of fighting against the Nazis, so that was good. The problem was that jungle training in the swamps of Louisiana was sort of a problem, because I didn't think there were swamps or jungles in Germany. The rumor had it that we were being prepared for a landing in a Pacific island called Okinawa. This dampened my hopes to join in the fight against the Nazis, and I tried to volunteer to be transferred out when they were planning the D-Day invasion, but my the commander wouldn't give me permission. We were transferred to California in September of 1944, and we were trained in amphibious landings in preparation for going to the islands. We had a mock invasion landing and we landed and conquered La Jolla, California. That time, La Jolla, California was about 500 people, and there was no casualties, thank goodness, on either side, but there was a lot of cheering at the end. La Jolla is now, I think, an upstate California town. In December of 1944, as we were preparing to embark for the battle in the Pacific, Hashem decreed otherwise. In the Nazis, the surprise blitzkrieg attack in Europe, referred to as the Battle of the Bulge, surrounded the 101st Infantry, Airborne, several other divisions, broke through the lines, destroyed the communications to the rear, and almost took Antwerp. It was almost a replay of Dunkirk, if those of you remember what happened to the British at Dunkirk. General Eisenhower had made a colossal and deadly mistake, and he scrambled for reinforcements. He issued orders that the 86th Division should be moved east to Europe, not west to the South Pacific. I was happy about that. In less than 3 days and nights, we packed our gear. We loaded jeeps and half-tracks and other equipment on railroad cars, and we pulled out for the conflict in Europe. 86th Division was to the rescue. We arrived in Le Havre, France, and joined the battle on the west bank of the Rhine River in the area of Cologne. The orders were to stand firm to repel what was anticipated as another Nazi blitz attack. And intelligence reported there were 350,000 German troops massing on the east bank of the Rhine River. Our division was 15,000. At night, enemy commandos would cross the river to probe our fortifications and defenses and strength. We had a small contingent of tanks as well attached to the 86. And but other than that, we were spread out from Cologne, many of you know the country there, to Remagen, which was in the south, about a half-hour drive or so. We set up a defensive position on the river with heavy machine guns in some of the factories there on the river. And we did lookout shifts from the tall buildings trying to determine if the Germans were about to attack. On one of the shifts, I went up into a tall apartment building that had been partially destroyed on the river. And about the 6th floor, I sat down at the desk. I had a beautiful view of the Rhine River so peacefully in front of me. And I started looking through the desk, and the first thing I noticed was a Thomas and Tefillin on the top of the desk drawer. I said, well, that's strange. The apartment must have been owned by a Jewish family. So I decided to look around the apartment a little more further, and I looked in the closet, and there were 2 brand new German officer uniforms, complete with insignia. They looked like they'd never been worn. Now I had a real problem. Did a German officer confiscate this apartment? If he did, why did he leave Thomas and Tefillin in such a prominent place in the desk? And if it was a Jew, maybe he was masquerading as a German officer. This was a problem for me and what to do. I don't know what many of you would have done. Probably half of you will tell me you was taking the Thomas and Tefillin, but we were in a combat situation. I didn't think that was going to be the best idea. Especially I felt that if Jewish fellow came back to his apartment, he would be devastated if he found that his Thomas and Tefillin were missing. In March 28th, March 28th was the first night of Pesach. I and 2 other soldiers, Gentile soldiers, were there from our company. We're manning a strong point on the Rhine River in an abandoned bare aspirin factory. I thought to myself, we hope that the Germans have a headache, because we got the aspirin factory. Anyway, we were, it was the first night of Pesach, and I thought to myself, this will be the first time that I never had a Pesach Seder, never observed. Only a miracle could help me in such a situation. I looked at my watch, it was 10 o'clock at night. I wasn't going to, the captain was not going to call me and tell me we're going to have a Seder back at the base. I knew that. I was the only Jew in that outfit. We heard a chugging sound of a vehicle. The Germans had been coming over as commandos and, as I mentioned, wreaking a little havoc. So when we heard the sound of a motor, I grabbed my Browning automatic rifle and a couple magazines, told my two associates, let's set up an ambush, probably Germans that have landed. We got out, we saw by the light of the moon an American Jeep chugging along, and we stopped them. It turned out to be a driver, and the passenger was a young seminary student, chaplain from Wheaton, Illinois, who, when we were going on hikes, when we had maneuvers, whatever, he would always like to join our group, and he would come over to me and spend all the time asking me all his questions about Jewish holidays and observance, to the point that he was so sympathetic, I thought that he was a candidate for conversion. Anyway, he said to me, Larry, the JWB, Jewish Welfare Board, sent a bottle of wine and a box of matzah. But I know that you've got to have a Pesach Seder. I told him, thank you very much. You're a miracle. I didn't expect it. Thank you very much. It's a very dangerous place, and this really was very important to me. There were two other Jewish boys, not in our outfit, but on the line in other strong points on the river, and I sent the two Gentile soldiers to replace them and bring the boys over and tell them that we're going to have a Seder after all. What we did is if you turned on any lights, had any lights whatsoever, even a flashlight, the Germans would answer immediately with a bombardment from across the river. So there were some sandbags that we found that had been left there by the Germans. We built it like an igloo that you could go inside, and I had a candle, and by the flickering light of a candle, we held a little mini Seder. We didn't have Haggadah, we didn't have Parosis, but we did the best we could under the circumstances. We all knew the Fear Conscious, we knew Dayenu, Agajo. We hit the high points, and I will tell you that it was probably the most meaningful Seder of my life, because we were on German soil, observing. We had just about finished the Seder, and a runner came down from headquarters, and he said, I've got a message. He was very excited. What's the message? He said, well, at Remagen, the Germans had blown all the bridges on the Rhine River. They had failed to blow properly the bridge at Remagen. And we had a group of tanks, maybe 20 tanks, that were attached to our unit that were there at Remagen. And they had crossed without authorization the bridge. Now they were there on the east side of the Rhine River with 350,000 German troops. The general didn't think this was a good idea, and on one hand he didn't want to tell the tanks to come back. So he decided that we were going to make a surprise attack on the Germans, Nazis. So the runner said at 4 o'clock, 0400 tomorrow morning, we'll cross the Rhine River. We thought to ourselves, well, we don't have a bridge. How are we going to get across? Are we going to swim? No, he said the engineers are going to bring up rubber boats and you'll paddle across. We thought to ourselves that we had an improvised Seder. The prayers were about freeing the Jewish people from slavery in Egypt. But we had now the question that we're about to liberate our Jewish brothers and sisters who were slaves to the Nazis in the concentration camps. wondered what was in store for us, but we didn't have to wait long. Next morning at 4 o'clock, we were down at the river shivering in the cold, in the abandoned buildings, and the engineers came up with little rubber dinghies. They told us 12 to a boat. The noise was deafening because the artillery had opened up with saturated bombing of the east bank of the river. The Germans caught on that something was going on, so they started answering with their artillery, and we got into the boats. The person in charge said, "Fellas, paddle for your lives. It depends upon it." The Rhine River was running very high because in the spring, the spring rains, and there was a lot of shell fire. It was like the 4th of July, but we were squeezed in this small dinghy, out, overloaded with all our equipment and weapons. One of my buddies said to me, "My mother told me to stay away from the Navy," and now I understand why. And we've been trained for amphibious landings, but this was sort of ridiculous. In any event, we crossed the river with shells flying. The problem was that the boats were rubber, and if any boat was hit by the shells, it didn't make it. But our boat did, and we made it on the other side, and thank God, none of the boys in our group were hurt. The area was that we landed in Cologne in the semi-dark, and our objective was Eindhoven, Ludwigshafen, and a third crossroad about 25 miles from Cologne. Our mission was we took the Autobahn, and because I was able to speak some German, more Yiddish, I was the default lead scout because I could converse with the soldiers that I met, Nazi soldiers. And I saw a dirt road leading off of the main Autobahn. And I noticed that there were huge wagons on this, off the road with huge pots on them. The pots were maybe 5, 6, big as a wagon, and a whole group of them. And I thought to myself, maybe it's a German Nazi camp, military camp. So I led a patrol down the road, and we saw high barbed wire fences, a wood watchtower surrounding an area, and I realized that we had stumbled upon a slave labor camp. When we broke into the camp, we were told it was an IG Farben military complex. The survivors, the welcoming survivors, I would say, were in striped uniforms. They were gaunt skeletons of human beings. They stretched out against the fence. It was very hard to understand all the tumult of liberation. People were crying, there was joy, and it was hard for the soldiers to see these people who had homes, had businesses, had livelihoods, and put into a situation which was the most terrible that any human being could be in. My commander, I tried to determine where the guards were, but I tried to find them. I was told that they changed into civilian clothes and ran. I did not have any luck finding them. I wanted to share my rations. I had food that I would normally carry in I carried 2 ammunition belts, one with magazines with bullets for the Germans, and one for food to keep me going. And I tried to start to pass out food, but my commander told me, don't do it, it's very dangerous. People could die from eating this food. I felt like dying. But in any event, he said in those days, you didn't have cell phones. You know, a radio for medics, for medical help, and they'll bring stretchers and we'll take care of the people. I mean, there were several thousand people. He said, I'll give you 2 hours if you want to have, I told him I wanted to have a religious service. And he said, I'll give you 2 hours. And I told him which companies there were 2 other Jewish boys. And he went and had them picked up. We held a Pesach Mincha memorial service. And people lined up, and we did an elbow rocking, and each one person could give the name of their family or their friends. It was very moving. Probably was the most moving Mincha service I ever attended. In any event, after this unexpected liberation of the camp, our company continued on to meet our objective, and we did it with minimal casualties. The battle for the Ruhr, the area from Cologne east, is called the Ruhr area of Germany. It lasted 10 days. We captured 53,500 German Nazi troops. We inflicted many thousands of casualties. And we had saved the tanks from Remagen from being annihilated. We thought it was a victory. And I personally think that it led to the ultimate unconditional surrender of the Nazis on May 8th. After the Ruhr victory, the 86th Division was shipped by 40 and 8 cars, boxcars, to the Munich area. For those of you who don't know what the 40 and 8 cars were, 40 and 8 stands for 40 people and 8 horses. And I would think the horses would have died from being suffocated in those boxcars. And they were the ones that the Germans used extensively to send Jews to the camps, Auschwitz, Buchenwald, and so forth. The army loaded about 50 of us into one of those cars, and you really couldn't sit down. There was no room, they were so tight. In Munich, we were there in April, early April, and those of you probably know President Roosevelt died April 12th. General Patton had been outraged by the Yalta agreement. The Yalta agreement was made between General Joseph Stalin Winston Churchill and President Roosevelt on a yacht off the Crimean coast there in the Baltic Sea. And the purpose was to determine the future of Europe once the war is won. They divided Europe into spheres of influence. And General Patton was outraged that Roosevelt had awarded Uncle Joe, I don't know if you're from that era, but Stalin was portrayed as a smiling figure on all the posters and as a very genial person. Years later, the I think it was 49, 50, when McCarthy claimed that there were a lot of communists in the State Department. I don't think he was really wrong, because the State Department was very pro Joseph Stalin. And Roosevelt was ill at the time, since he died just a month and a half later, wasn't up to the negotiations. In any event, the Russians got all of Eastern Europe, the Balkans, the Poland, Czechoslovakia, and half of Germany. General Patton, when he heard that Roosevelt passed away, felt that there was a possibility of changing the Yalta Agreement. He organized the special forces from the 86th Division, 3 groups, one group to go to Pilsen, one group to go to Wurzburg, and the third group, which I was a part of, to Prague. The general spoke to us, told us that this was an unauthorized incursion into Czechoslovakia, and that we would have to forage in the land once we got there, because he couldn't promise us support if we got bogged down. But he said, go to the warehouses and take whatever you need. So we did. We had about 1,000 troops. We had 4 tanks and about a group of trucks. And we took, the main problem was gasoline, because we knew that there wouldn't be gasoline stations open in Czechoslovakia for us. So we took a 5-gallon jerry can, filled them with gasoline, and piled them on the truck and hung them from the sides of the tank. Now this was not the safest thing to do, as you can well imagine, but we were desperate. In order to try to minimize the danger, the scouts, I was still a lead scout, sat on the top of the tank. Whenever we came to any area that looked a little dangerous or suspicious, we would get out and fan out and go for about a mile or 2, and then give the road was clear, we would allow the tanks to go forward. We arrived in the edge of Prague on April 30th, September, April, June, yeah. That's right. We arrived there at night. There was no hotels, there was no barracks. We just dug in fortifications on the edge of the city and cut some fir trees for camouflage. The next morning, the commander called me and said, take a patrol in, find out where the Germans are. He didn't know. So I did. I took a few fellows, 8 or 10, and we went into the city about 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, maybe 3 kilometers. And the positive thing was that we noticed that all the houses had white sheets hanging from the window. We assumed one of 2 things. We assumed that it either was a welcome for the Americans or that they were surrendering. In either event, it bode well, and as we were walking in or patrolling in, a young woman came running out of one of the bungalows, her hands up in the air, Nishisan, don't shoot. And she came over to me and she was out of herself. She said she was hidden by the Gentile German family. She spoke to me in Yiddish. And she was hidden by this German family, and she was overjoyed. I found her full of information. She told me that a main body of German troops had left the day or two before because they heard Americans were coming. And but the main headquarters was in a medieval castle on the outskirts of Prague. And she told me where it was. And I went back to the commander and I told him that I met this very nice young lady and she was wonderful. She told me right where everything was, where the Germans are, where the castle is. And he says, Larry, he says, this woman could be a plant of the Germans. Oh, I did their plan. They know that we only have 1,000 troops. They're going to annihilate us. They're going to make mincemeat out of us and have us for supper. I said, well, sir, this woman is telling the truth. He said, how do you know? I said, because she's Jewish. So he said, well, I'll tell you, if you think that she's telling the truth, you take a few fellows on a patrol, find the castle, and see if the Germans are willing to surrender. Okay, I said, oh, I didn't have any alternative. I said, fine, we'll do that. I got the patrol. We went to the place where the woman described, follow the directions. Always follow the directions. My wife doesn't do that all the time. And I noticed, the first thing I noticed was that there was a Nazi flag flying from the top of the castle. I thought to myself, that means it's inhabited and it's the right place. Because, you know, no addresses. I told my patrol, my fellows the castle was set in a beautiful open area, but it was all forest surrounded. There was a field of fire so that they could defend the fortress. But other than that, it was open. So I had my patrol stay in the woods, on the edge of the woods, where they could give covering fire in case I needed it. And I told my ammunition bearer, I carried not only a BAR, Browning automatic, which is today is compared to an AK. It fires many shots at one time, like a machine gun, but it's more accurate. And I also carried a bazooka. Anybody know what a bazooka is? It's not a gun. It's a rocket launcher. And but the ones that they made in those days required two people. One, the person that lugged the bazooka around and fired it, and the person that carried the rockets. Because the rockets were put in from the rear. So I had my ammunition bearer, the fellow that was supposed to carry the rockets, and I'm now going to crawl up near the castle to see if they would like to surrender, like my commander suggested. There was a big rock in a very strategically located place. I thought to myself, this would work out. And so I crawled up with George, and we got to the rock. I aimed my bazooka. I said to George, load a rocket. George slowly said to me, well, there's a problem. I said, what's the problem? He says, I don't have any rockets. I said, but George, you have this whole belt with sticking out all these. No, he says, those are cans of sea ration. You see, when they told me they couldn't get gasoline, I figured they couldn't get food either. So I filled, instead of making rockets, I took food. So I was debating on what to do, but you see, I looked over my shoulder and I saw in the woods behind my patrol, the Army brass with binoculars watching this operation. And I was a little more afraid of the Army brass than I was of the German. So, a 19-year-old doesn't have good sense. I got up and I gave him a 3-sentence bite, a sound bite. I used this on many occasions and it always worked. You say, "Raus mit dir, langsam Kopf, alles kaputt." Those are the 3 things you're supposed to tell them. Alles kaputt, langsam Kopf, raus mit dir. Said it a couple times, as loud as I could, and nobody shot back. But I was worried that it wasn't going to work, but after a few minutes, I was surprised myself. To get the attention, I'd shot off one magazine of my BAR against the door of the castle, but the door was like a steel door and everything bounced off. But it did get the attention of the Germans inside, and shortly thereafter the doors swung open, and out marched about 100 troops with their weapons on their shoulders, and the lead person, the officer, had the German flag in a down position towards the ground, which signified surrender. They lined up in front of the castle. The soldiers stacked their weapons and stood at attention, and my officers, who were now in the woods, ran forward to take and accept the surrender, which they did. I got out of it a Army German bayonet, a dress bayonet. My commanding officer got a silver star. I thought that was a little more valuable. But he did say to me, "Good job, Larry." After the Germans surrendered, we sent them back with the trucks to the prisoner war camps. It was now about the 2nd of May. I would go out each day on a patrol, and the next day, a delegation from the city, dressed in diplomatic garb, came to me and talked to me in German and a little bit of English to tell me that the city of Prague welcomes American soldiers and offering us the key of the city. I told them, well, I can't personally accept anything, but I'll refer this to the higher authority, meaning my commander. I thought to myself, we'll probably get a good food, you probably maybe you can get a hotel room, who knows. In any event, I went back to the commander and said, "Okay, they're ready to surrender the city to us. We've got Czechoslovakia." He said, "Wait a minute." He said, "I got to get General Patton approval. I'll call him on the radio." So I was then told that General Patton was going to fly back to Washington for a consultation with President Truman, General Marshall, and they would clear it with Eisenhower. In any event, each day I would go on the patrol, I would meet the same diplomats, and I had to give them the same answer. You got to be patient. I can't give you an answer of the situation. They were very fearful, and I can understand why, that the Russians were coming. In any event, after a few days, I got the message back to my commander to tell them that the General Patton had been turned down and that the Russians would be taking over about about May 10th, war was over May 8th, about May 10th, a metal-bedecked soldier on a white horse with a motley crew of Russian soldiers came marching in, and with my job, the owner's job, to introduce them to the delegation from Prague. There was a ceremony, and after the ceremony, we packed our gear and retreated back to Mannheim, Germany, Munich, and then Mannheim, Germany. Mannheim, Germany was on the point between the four zones, the British zone, the American zone, the British zone, and the French zone. And with that, more time? Okay. Keep them, let me know. The company, our company, who had not gone on this trip, had been, and the other members of the 86th Infantry Division were manning the checkpoints on the dividing line between the zones. When we came back, because I could speak some German and some Yiddish, some English. Any event, I even picked up a few words in French. They asked me to run the checkpoint with a group of other soldiers, which we did. The problem was that I was handed a memo from the commanding general of the area, which was General McNary. General McNary said that we do not allow anyone to go through the checkpoint from the camps or as refugees. Now, it's possible that he wasn't completely anti-Semitic. If anybody came through the checkpoint, they were then the responsibility of that country. So America then would have to build dormitories and food. I didn't think that order was one that was fair. And I told our fellows, if the people come to say they're from Russia, or they come from Germany, or they come from any other country, tell them they can't come without permits. If they say that they were in the camps, if they talk Yiddish, if they're Jews, they come in. And in about 2 to 3 weeks, it became known in the street that this was a hole in the line, and we had several thousand people that came in until the upper echelons realized that there was a hole in the line because they were getting all these people that they didn't expect and were responsible for. So they took us off the checkpoint. I was very thankful that very shortly thereafter complaints were made about General McNary's edict, and he was replaced by a believing, I would say, a Christian general by the name of Lucius Clay, and he believes that Jews should be in Palestine. That was his idea, and he was very helpful to any of the people, the refugees that wanted to go to Palestine. To get to Palestine, you had to go through the port that was controlled by the British. The British had closed the port to allowing any Jews to leave through their facility. General Lucius Clay arranged that anybody that wanted to go, the Jewish agency, I think, set up a ship, and the United States set up trucks, sealed trucks, and took the people that wanted to go in sealed trucks that the British could not open to the port where they were able to embark for, in those days it was Palestine in 1945. Do I have time for it?
About the ticker tape parade and.
Yeah, but I've got time. Okay. A lot more. The 86th Division was the first combat division redeployed to the United States, returned to the United States, and that was the good news. I suppose the not so good news for us was that we're also going to be the first division to be deployed to the Pacific. In fact, we were the only combat division redeployed to the Pacific, possibly because of our previous amphibious landing training. So in early June, we loaded Le Havre and went by ship back to New York. And there we got an amazing ticker tape parade down Broadway. We came into the port. Everybody, I remember, was looking at the boat made a sieve, went around the Statue of Liberty, and they had all kinds of fireboats welcoming us with red, white, and blue streams of water. They had boats that had a lot of young ladies on them with signs, welcome 86th Infantry Division, thank you for your service. At that time, General Eisenhower had proclaimed a non-fraternization ban in Germany. Non-fraternization meant that American soldiers should not socialize with the German population. And this was well, there was a different opinion on that subject. And so the girls had to sign no fraternization with the German, fraternize with us. After the ticker tape parade, we were loaded on trains to our various destinations. We got a few weeks leave, and every place that we went, the trains would stop, and there would be people there with coffee and non-kosher donuts. But it was nice to have a band, a mayor, somebody would get up and make a speech. It was very moving. Should I go on?
The war's almost over, keep going.
Okay. We went to California, San Francisco, where we were issued new uniforms for the Pacific area. And it was determined at the water fountain that we're probably going to make a landing on Japan proper. This did not sound very exciting, and it seemed rather dangerous. We had everybody was betting on when we would be able to return to the United States. So they were saying, well, we'll return in this was 1945, 1946, 1947, the Golden Gate in 48, and they were making bets. We got on the ship, and the boat went out about 6 hours and developed engine trouble. And now it returned. And for the rest of our trip, there were arguments of whether the bet should be paid off returned because of the problem with the boat. We got as far as the Hawaiian Islands, where we anchored offshore, and we stayed there for approximately 3 weeks or more. It was the end of early August, and we knew that something was an offing. Why we were sitting there waiting to go in to Japan. We were waiting for the Enola Gay to drop the bombs. That's what we were really waiting for. We didn't know that at the time, but we heard that there was going to be some kind of action against Japan. And when they did drop the 2 atomic bombs, the Defense Department determined that Japan would surrender, and therefore they redirected us to a landing on the Philippine Islands. So we didn't make that landing. It was actually a very little opposition. The Japanese army was up in the north part of Luzon. We landed in the south part of Luzon, which it was fine. And my group was, because we speak some good Japanese, was transferred to the north about 250 miles or more north of Manila in the forest and mountainous area of Luzon. And there our job, my job, was to secure the surrender of the Japanese troops, which we did every day. I used to go out on a truck with 2 Japanese prisoners and a loudspeaker, and I also had a helper, a pet monkey that I had found, a little one, who used to sit on my shoulder. And the monkey had extrasensory perception. And the monkey would tell me, by babbling and chirping, that there was somebody hiding in the woods and the bushes and the trees. And we would stop and sometimes shoot a few bullets, and I would tell the Japanese prisoners on the truck who were manning the loudspeaker, tell them, come in for coffee and donuts. Stay out and you get shot. The first part, my commander thought that was a good thing to tell them. Come in and you get coffee and donuts. The second part was my idea. If you don't come in, you're going to get shot. So we used to pick up about 50, 60 prisoners every day, and that worked out for a while.
Were the donuts kosher?
One day, I got a message from the headquarters that they needed me down at Manila. We used to hitch a ride all the time in the airplanes because Clark Field was empty. I went down to Clark to the main headquarters in Marikina, which is part of Manila, and I'd been looking forward to it because it was very hard to find food that I could eat in such a desolate place, and even though I was a friend of the mess sergeant. Remember that I told you that was important. But the thing that surprised me was that I didn't have any minion. And I said, well, where's the minion? When did we have it? He said, there's no minion here. So I said, well, we have to organize a minion. So I put up a sign. Friday night, we're going to have a minion in the chapel. And Friday night, about 15 soldiers came, and everything was fine except on the wall right above the lectern there, they had a Jewish boy hanging from. I didn't think that was appropriate.
He came right short.
And we couldn't count it for a minion. So we did the next best thing. We covered him with a sheet, and that worked out for a week or first week, the second week. The base chapel was a Catholic, comes charging in one Friday night, about the third week, and he sees his beloved being covered with a sheet, and his boy standing and davening, and he was not very friendly. He told us, this is completely unacceptable. If you continue this, you're going to be court-martialed, whatever. And he used language that was not fitting for a base chaplain. we finished with a quick cottage and left. A couple of us decided that we had to do something about this, and we went to the Journal of the 86th Infantry Division to complain that the chapel was not non-denominational. And he was a Catholic, Irish, and he said, well, I agree with you, but there's nothing I can do, but I will refer it to the higher authority. He did not mean Hashem, he was going to check with his superior. His superior was General Douglas MacArthur. And a few days later, I got a call from him. We came to his office. He said, would it be acceptable for your boys to have your Friday night and whatever other time you want to have services in the home of General Douglas MacArthur? I said, well, I think I could arrange it. General MacArthur had a home that looked like the White House. It had a swimming pool, the basement, a bowling alley. It was very palatial. And so when I put up the sign that the next minion was going to be in General MacArthur's home, we got instead of 15 fellows, we got about 50 fellows. I think some of them were even Jewish. It became the most popular place on Friday nights, and people wanted to come to that minion. I got the housemaid to make a small kiddish afterwards of drinks and cookies, and she used no ingredients that were not kosher. And it was very successful. Okay. I'm sorry I'm keeping you too long, but I think that my experience in the Army, I would say at times they were very dangerous, and sometimes it was not so easy, especially in terms of prayer and in terms of food. But I felt that it was important that Jews be in the forefront of the fight against the Nazis. I think we were successful in doing that. I'd like to thank Sharon Weingarten for organizing the evening, and I want to thank all of you for coming.
Thank you.